on.
Okay. You're rolling.
This is Nameless Bride. Mary's family owned a tavern. She grew up as a small child. She helped her parents clean up spills and helped her mother cook. And her father ran the pub, and they had a good life. I mean, nothing perfect, but it was good. And she thought this is the way things would always be until the plague came through. And her parents died. And the tavern got passed on to her father's brother. And so did she. And she was a teenager then, when life changed completely. And she became something he could sell along with the room. She became something he could shuttle around to serve the food with a beating or two. She had no name. She became Hey You. Hey You. Hey You. She was nameless, the nameless serving girl that'll serve you not just your meal, but up in your room. Didn't take long for her to decide she didn't like this anymore, and she ran away. They caught her and brought her back, and she ran away again. They brought her back, she ran away again. They brought her back, and all she wanted to do was to be with her mother and father. And they stopped her from jumping off the roof. And they finally, her uncle and her stepmom finally took her to the local nunnery and gave her to them because all she wanted was to sit around and cry and pray all day anyways, and what better place for it? It's not like they're making any money up there anymore, regardless of the fact that she still had 2 legs. Things seemed to turn around at first. The nunnery was nice, and she walked around, and she was going to be a nun, and she was learning all the things she'd have to say to take her vows, and it was beautiful. There were gardens to tend and meals to cook, and the girls were all friends with each other. And then one day, as they were walking back to the nunnery, a carriage came by on the road and stopped. And a guy looked out the window, called out for his driver, and pointed at her. That one. I want that one. It was a rich man. I'm going to be a nun. I'm devoted to the nunnery. I'm going to take my vows soon. You can't have me. I'm a child of God. And the man laughed. I'm a prince. My parents run this kingdom. Let's go see these nuns. And so he followed the nuns down the road along with the apprentice girls, who were all giggling. Many of them were very excited it was a prince, and man, were they wishing they were in her shoes. Nobody asked what she wanted. They went in, and she was stuck out in the hall. All she could think of is, this is the life I want. This is close to God, and this is close to my family. I don't want to go with him, whoever he is. I don't care. I don't care. This is what I want. I'd rather be dead than go with him. But the head of the nunnery, the Mother Superior, she came out and she said, we just got a really wonderful donation for the church. And so, darling, God has spoken to me, and you are going to go with him. You're going with him. With all of God's blessings, we'll do the ceremony. But I don't want to go. I don't want to. I want to stay here. Why doesn't anybody listen to what I want? You're just a girl. You just don't know. You're going with a prince. Don't you understand? He's the prince. Someday, you're going to be a queen. She cried as they picked her up and put her in the carriage because she wasn't going to walk. He didn't say a word to her the entire way. He sat there smiling and looking at her like a cat looks at a mouse, and she cried and cried. He never even asked her name. She kept waiting for that. He never once asked her name. They got to the palace and the trumpets sounded and all wanted to be important in velvet outfits came out standing around as they paraded her in as if she was some fatted cow for a feast. That night they dressed her and they made her look really pretty and they said, don't cry, you can't cry. You have to not cry. We'll beat you worse than any beating you've ever had in your life if you cry. And we have whips and we're not afraid to use them. But I don't want to be here. It's not about what you want. The prince has said he is marrying you. You should be excited. How many women get chosen to be the queen someday? You're going to be a princess in several days, but I don't want to. It's not about what you want, honey. It's about what's good for the kingdom. That's what the queen said that evening. And there she took her down, and like a puppet or a statue, she had to sit at the meal and smile and look awkwardly pretty. Did anyone ask what her name was? Did anyone ask what she wanted? They just put things on the plate for her to eat, and she was supposed to react right, and it was supposed to be good, and she thought it all looked like eating dirt and rocks, and she wanted none of it. It was the finest meal that had ever been laid in front of her in her life, and it looked like sand and dirt and worms, and she wanted none of it. But she had to spoon it in and smile, because that's what ladies do. They talked about her as if she was some fine horse they got at market. Ah, she'll win the race. She's got good teeth and good hips. This is a good one. What about me? I'm right here. Shh. You're a princess now. It's not proper for you to speak out of turn. We'll address you when it's time for you to speak. When she got back up to her room, they already had a wedding dress started for her, and it was bright yellow. It was deep yellow, like the color of a daffodil. It was her mother's favorite color, and she had hated that color since the day her mother had died, because it reminded her that she would never feel the loving arms and support and protection her mother had always given her ever again. And here, the damn dress was that color. She tried ripping at it, but they slapped her hands away and said, "What are you doing, you crazy girl? Go sit down. Behave yourself." Do you even care what I want? Do you care what I think? I don't want a yellow dress. The prince loves this color and you will be wearing it. Stop with your nonsense. You are not a child anymore. You know how things work in this world. Behave yourself. Grow up. And she sat there, shaking as they left the room. And there's the dress in front of her, as if some giant joke laughing at her, just right in the middle of the room. She can't look around it. So finally she went out on the balcony, but she thought, maybe I'll jump. I had thoughts of jumping before, maybe I'll jump this time. But she went out on the balcony and the stone walls were too high. But there was the moon, straight up. When she looked up at the moon, it seemed like someone was looking back at her. And it was cold, but it was numbing as well. For the first time in years, she did not feel so upset. Even the grief from losing her family was numb. She went inside, cold feet, cold hands, cold heart, and she laid down on top of the bed, cried herself to sleep, and had a dream. And in the dream, she was on the balcony again, looking at the moon, when a black shape landed. And it was a raven. It landed on the stone wall and looked at her, tilting its head. It spoke. It was a dream, so it made sense at the time. It spoke. What would you do to be free of this? What would you do? What would you give? I could set you free. She thought about it. I don't want this. I don't want to marry him. I don't want this life. I don't even like being alive anymore since my family died. This is hell. And there is no God looking out for me. There's nothing except a bunch of people who want to use me, and they don't even care what my name is. I can give you what you want. I can give you what you seek. But tomorrow when you see me, you must follow me, and you must do everything I tell you to, or you will not break free of this. Everything. And you will give anything, and you will give everything. It's worth it. I'm already giving everything. Everything I don't want to give, and I have no control, and I want it. For once in my life, I want to be the one who says what happens and when and where and how. It laughed, its cawing laugh, as it flew away. And when she woke up in the morning, she thought it was a dream until she stood up and she felt something like a dry leaf under her foot, but when she moved it, there was one black raven feather there. And that day they were planning the wedding rehearsal, and they were planning and they were bustling in and out, and they were telling her what to do, and she was a dog jumping through hoops, and she kept waiting. Where's the raven? Where's the raven? When's it going to happen? And the longer it took, the more she thought it's never going to happen. It's just a dream. My mind is playing tricks on me. A raven must have flew in and out last night. But that evening, as they were getting ready to take her down to dinner, the servant who was supposed to stay with her at all times heard someone call his name down the hall, and he ducked out, and when he did, he closed the door, but then it opened back up a little, and in the doorway there was the movement of a wing, a black wing. Was it shadow? Was it real? She had no idea, but she was going, and she was right behind that shadow, that possible wing, that possible raven. And he didn't go down the main stairs, he turned down the servant stairs. And there he went. And it was real, it was a raven flying in the castle, wings almost touching the sidewalls. He was huge. And she was chasing him for all her might. And you could hear servants distracted by things in the rooms they were in. There were several times that people should have walked out on her, but at the last moment somebody called their attention away, and they turned their back as she went racing by with a bird flapping in front of her. And when they made it down to the iron gate in the wall, she thought soon, someone's going to notice any time now. They're going to be looking for me, and we're never going to get out of here. There's no way any of these gates are going to be open, and there should be guards everywhere. There was when we came in. But there was this creaky, old, rusty iron gate, and it's wide open as if people forgot it even existed. And she went running right through it as the bird went flying out into the night, out into the woods beyond the castle. And as they got out their ways, and she was running in her fancy dress they'd put her in, and the trees were ripping the dress to shreds left and right, that white dress she was in that night shone in the light of the moon, silver. She looked like a cloud veering through the woods, some mystical being, perhaps a ghost. They were about a half a mile away when she heard the shout and heard the howling hounds, and knew the prince had found that his finest treasure had gone missing. And she ran even faster then, because she could feel the bird telling her, even though it never spoke again, faster, faster. And the bird led her to a ravine where there was this tiny little pathetic rope bridge going across, where the boards were rotten and old, and toothpicks at the palace would have been thicker and stronger to stand on. But she, well, I might die. And she went running right across as the bird swooped across. And as she hit the far side and made the leap to scrabble up the grass, the bridge collapsed down into the ravine, sliding down and away. She went on without a backward glance. And you could hear the hounds getting closer, but the ravine would slow them down. And she ran and ran and ran for many hours that night. And it got to that carousing hour in the middle of the night where most parties break up and most bars turn the fires down. And it was at that moment that the raven led her in to a little hamlet raven stopped in front of that tavern. In. Give them anything. Give them everything. This is your wedding tonight. It's not like she hadn't done it before, but this time it was her choice when she walked in, whistled to everyone there, and dropped the dress and said, I am your gift tonight. And everyone had a slice. She went running out the back as the raven circled through, and it seemed that no one could see it but her as the rest were falling asleep with blissful smiles on their faces as she went running out the back in that tattered dress again. And she went racing on. The ravine had slowed the prince down, but he was furious. She was his, and she would be his, and by God, no one determines their path if he's already chosen it. The ravine had slowed him down, but when he made it to the hamlet, there was a guy standing outside relieving himself with a blissful smile. Hey, man, you missed out. There was this great chick here earlier in a ripped up dress. We all had a piece. You could have too. And the prince sicked the dogs on him, burnt down the hamlet, burnt down everyone in it, because no one can know what she did. This is my bride. She is mine, and I will have her. And on he went. But the hamlet slowed him down, and she got further and further away as the raven led her off through the wilds. He followed her for weeks, and gradually his followers went back to the palace, telling the king and queen, your son is mad. Your son should never rule. He's a madman. He's obsessed with chasing a crazy woman through the woods. He should be learning how to rule a kingdom. The king and queen were distraught, but they continued to rule, and their son continued on his mad chase of this crazy woman across the landscape. It was several weeks later, and she was gaunt, and the dress was ruined. But she was still ahead of him, and it was down to him and a few of the hounds that were still alive. As she finally followed the raven up to the top of a cliff, and as the moon came out nice and thin, a thin crescent smile in the sky, there she stood waiting for him at the edge of the cliff. And as she stood at the edge of the cliff, looking back, she smiled again, because the raven had spoken one more time, and she accepted what was coming. But he had no idea. And there he was, and the hounds, he tried to sick them on her, but the hounds wouldn't go. That raven was swirling around, and they could see it. He could not, because it was not a bird. It was a she. And that raven swirled around, and those dogs backed off and whined and cried, and no matter how much he beat them, they would not go for her, and she beckoned him forward. He's been waiting for this moment and planning this moment for weeks, and she took that from him too. And there she is at the edge of the cliff with the wind whipping around her, the sound of water on the rocks below, of a lake so black that the night looks brighter than the water does from there. And he made his way forward, looking at her just as weak as she was, but with weapons where she had none, nothing but that tattered dress and a smile. And some say that a knife is dangerous, but a smile is by far the most dangerous weapon you can wield when you are a madman. And as he grabbed her arms, she smiled then and tipped backward. And as they went over the side, she said, you never even asked my name. And one would think this is where the story ends, but you see, she made a deal with a queen, and the queen was an Unseelie queen. And so when her body washed up on the shore, frozen, the queen stood the body up. It was a new toy to play with, a new garment to wear at court. The body of the Nameless Bride, with the spirit trapped in the back inside, mad and aware of everything the queen was doing and saying, and how she was using her as a puppet, just as she'd been used for so many days of her life. And now, it could be an